I think we've stopped talking about the importance of creativity and ingenuity and substitution when it comes to getting through tough times. And you know what? I think there's a big reason for that. Do you want to know what it is? I think it's because creativity and ingenuity and substitution can't really be monetized. Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast. I am Amy Dingman, coming to you from Clucky Dickens Farm, a 5-acre homestead in central Minnesota, where we are raising and growing and doing all sorts of things, but mostly we're just here living life. I'm here to teach you what I know and give you some deep things to think about and maybe even make you laugh. That's what we do here on the podcast. Today is March 11th, 2024. This is episode 270, and I'm so glad you are here today. What is today's topic? Today's topic is what you actually need to get through tough times and the one reason we're not talking about it. And I want to say ahead of this episode that I'm not saying at all that you shouldn't stock some stuff away. I'm not saying that prepping is a bad idea. But today, I want to give you a completely different perspective on the whole concept. And if you get to the end of today's episode and you hear the realizations that are at the end of today's episode and you're not mad, then you're not listening and you're not paying attention. And I'm not saying that to sell you on some kind of drama, because that's not how I am. I'm actually saying that to do quite the opposite. And that will all make sense when we get to the end of today's episode. But before we get to the main topic, what has been happening on the Lifestead? Well, the early spring continues here in Minnesota. And last week I talked about how, it feels like spring, but we're not going to start seeds yet. And it's not like we're having chick days here in Minnesota or anything. And I said that, and I recorded last week's episode, and then I left the farm, and I ran to town, and I went to Runnings, our local kind of farm store. And I'm there to pick some stuff up, and I get towards the back of the store, and I realize that I can hear peeping. And this is the very beginning of March, right? And I was like, what is that peeping? There is no way that they have chicks already. There's no way. It's only the beginning of March. And so I checked it out, and yeah, they had all their tubs set out with their heat lamps, and that whole thing was set out. And in a few of the tubs, not all of them, but a few of the tubs, they already had chicks. Oh my gosh. I didn't lie to you on purpose. I was just assuming that we weren't going to have chicks out, but holy moly, we do. Just a crazy, crazy year. We have kittens in the barn. We have a mom. She was really, really big in that big warm-up, and I thought, oh, with the weather change, I bet she's going to have her babies. And she did. She normally has them in the hayloft, and this time she just had them in a cat house on the, I guess, what you would call the main floor. What do we call the main floor of the barn if you have a hayloft? Like the first floor of the barn? We have the barn and then the hayloft? Like, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to call it the main floor of the barn, right? My big fancy red barn. So anyway, we have baby kitties, so that's always exciting. And what's really funny is I'm out in the barn the other day, and my husband just left on a fishing trip, and he left me unattended, knowing that there are chicks at the local Runnings, and we have an empty stall in our barn, and he left me unattended. That man must have a lot of trust in his wife. Let me tell you. Head over to YouTube and check out the videos that I'm making. Hello, if you are listening on YouTube right now, I am back to making long-form videos on YouTube, having a ton of fun with that. I know I've said that the last few weeks, every single episode. Because I am back to making videos, I've had some people contact me, more than a few people contact me and say, Amy, last year you said you were going to make this video about how to build an incubator from a cooler. And I was making that video, and it never came out. It was a huge video that we filmed. We filmed making another incubator from a cooler, like an igloo cooler, that setup of cooler. And I filmed the video. It was a huge video to film. It was an overwhelming video to edit. And I just kind of swept it under the rug, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. Okay. But now I have made a pact with myself. I'm getting that footage out again. I'm going to put it together. And I'm going to get that video out. It is on my list to have that video out next week. So the week of March 17th that is my plan, to have it out. And so I hope that I can come back here next week in the podcast and say, guess what? That video is finally out. I just need to edit it, work with the footage that I have, and know that if people have questions, they can post them in the comments or they can email me. Like, I just need to do it the best that I can, right? And just get the video out there for all y'all who are trying to figure out how to make a 12-volt incubator. I mean, so this is something off-gridders could use. An incubator to hatch out your own baby chicks. And then you don't have to go to Runnings and get your chicks. Actually, you'll still go to Runnings and you'll still be, when you see the baby chicks, and somehow some will still come home with you, because that's the homesteader life, right? What else can I tell you? My oldest turns 21 at the end of this week. That is so crazy to me. I don't know how he gets older, and I don't. Just kidding. My body begs to differ with that. But so that is awesome. Oldest is turning 21, so I don't know what he plans on doing to celebrate, but yay, happy birthday, oldest, if you are listening. All right, we are going to head over to the main topic, and I'm going to tell you my 2 cents, actually my $1.50, about what you actually need to get through tough times, and the real reason we're not talking about that. So what does it mean to make it when times are tough? What does it mean to survive when times are tough? What does that look like? Depending on what community you're in, the whole hullabaloo around that is going to look different. But I've been thinking about this a lot lately, just because of different conversations I've had with people and thinking back into my own life. And I have this proposal. Maybe instead of thinking about people who are going to survive tough times as like the tactical dude, or the family that's 100% off-grid, or the family who is 100% self-reliant and self-sufficient, or they say they are. Instead of thinking of those people as the people who are going to survive tough times, maybe we need to sometimes think about like the young couples who are very creatively rubbing 2 pennies and a rock and a stick together to make life work. Okay? I don't know if you've ever been at that place in your life. You probably have. I don't know if you know someone who's currently at that place in life. You probably do. But I want to talk about that today. I mentioned something in a video a couple of weeks ago. It was talking about homesteading and what is homesteading and are you really a homesteader? And in the video, I made a list of the things my husband and I were doing as a young married couple, okay? Young married couple living in a little town right on Main Street, little house, little yard. And I was talking about all the things we were doing back then. So cooking from scratch, growing a little garden. We were bartering and trading for a lot of different things because we didn't have no money. We were drying our clothes on a line. We were using home remedies. We were making our own everything. We were reusing and repurposing, and I learned to bake bread, and I learned to can and all this stuff, right? So I'm talking about that in my video. And then in the video, I ask, was that considered homesteading? Were we considered homesteaders right there on Main Street in our little house? Because that's not what we called it back then. Back then, that was just called a young couple with 2 little kids trying to save money. So I was thinking about that as we're hearing about all these people. What are you going to do to survive? And what are you going to do when tough times come and when it all hits the fan? So I was thinking about that because to me, that part of life and living with very little money and just the struggle of being a young couple and having 2 little kids, to me, that kind of felt like it had hit the fan a little bit, you know? That was a struggle for us. And then I was thinking back to when I was little, okay? So like in the 80s. And I have this very vivid memory of my dad and I walking the ditches along the road to collect aluminum cans that were in the ditches, right? That people had thrown out of their cars. And I remember me thinking that it was this awesome adventure. We're going out, we're getting aluminum cans. This is like so fun, right? It was an adventure for me. And I remember not realizing until I was much older, probably embarrassingly older, that wasn't an adventure. I mean, it was to me because I was little. I was like 5, right? But it wasn't an adventure. That was for us to make money, to add to the money that we were trying to live on. And I appreciate my parents for making all of those things fun, and me growing up believing that that was an adventure and that's what you do when you're a parent. But like, that's the reality of it. There's a lot of people who are living in tough times and that they're doing things to get by. Okay? I want us to think about that today. Prepping has in some ways become a checklist of things, a pile of stuff you're supposed to line your shelves with or stack in your basement, or it's a list of products you have to ensure your survival when the zombies attack, right? And there's a lot of people that will say that homesteading and prepping are two very different things, right? They'll say there are preppers who are homesteading and there are homesteaders who are prepping, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So there are people who will say that, but homesteading nowadays, in some ways, has also become a checklist and a pile of products, right? Do you feel that sometimes? Here's one of the things I want you to get out of today's episode. Sometimes it is not about collecting more stuff. Sometimes, lots of times, it's about learning to use what you already have. And I don't feel that that is something that's talked about enough. Because yes, some of our great-great-grandmas may have canned, okay? But it wasn't because she was a prepper, and it wasn't because she wanted a cool picture to compare with her prepper friends, okay? It was because canning was what you did at that time. That's just what you did. And if there was a crop failure the next year, or great-great-grandpa couldn't find work, or suddenly you had 2 more mouths to feed because you took in a couple neighbor kids, you had the stuff you had and you made the stuff you had last, and you got really creative with the items you had on hand. Here's something that we need to realize, and this goes a little bit against what people say, but I'm going to say it anyway, all right? Here's what I want you to realize. Great-great-grandma was not storing a trillion gazillion things in her basement. Great-great-grandma probably had 8 more kids than you in a house that is a third of the size, and she didn't have access to Amazon. Think about that, you guys. I like hearing stories about the Great Depression, not because those people were living the high life, pulling from their billion jars of canned potatoes and their buckets of rice and their tanks of gasoline. I like hearing stories from the Great Depression because you hear how people overcame tough times, despite some of them having very little. You hear how people came together. You hear how creative people were, and you hear what people had to do. And yes, you can argue, if I stockpile 40 bazillion things, I won't ever have to be in that situation. You're not wrong. You're not necessarily wrong. But I want people to think past that. If someone is prepared to be snowed in for a week at home, and they actually get snowed in for 3 weeks, it's going to take a lot of creativity to get through the 2 extra weeks. And we don't talk about that nearly enough. It's just, here's the list of the stuff you need. Put it in your basement. You're ready to rock. Let's set aside the modern concept of prepping as it's kind of come to be known, which for a lot of people is storing all the things and stockpiling all the things and this like Rambo type toughness, or it's a checklist of things you need to have and do if you're really prepared. And let's pretend that at the end of this podcast, for whatever reason, you have to live on what's in your house for a few weeks. Or however long. Just all of a sudden, you have what you have right now. And I know some of you are immediately thinking, well, that's why I stock my house up so good, so I don't have to worry about it. I get it, okay? But you're missing my point. So whatever you have to think about. Imagine with me for a minute that you're not at your house, and for some reason, you get stranded at someone's house, okay? And now it has hit the fan, and you don't have any of your stuff with you. And you're stranded at someone's house who has a rock and a stick and a bucket of water. And that's what I have. And now we're going to try and get through this tough time. And they are freaking out and they are stressed out. That's what I want to drop people into. Because at some point, You're going to have to get really creative on how you make things last and how you use things for purposes other than their intended use. You're going to have to use your brain a little bit. It's not just going to be grab this off the shelf, okay? That's really cool if you have lots of stuff, okay? Super cool. Gold star. You get 10 gold stars. You get all the blue ribbons. You did it. Go you. You're awesome. But what if all the stuff you stockpiled isn't where you get stranded? Or what if you get stranded where your stuff is, but you get robbed while your barn is on fire? Or you're out helping someone else? I don't know. What if you're led to share half of what you've stockpiled with someone for whatever reason, and then the crisis goes on longer than anybody was prepared for? What if you are really prepared for tough times and then you're not? And I don't know why it might be. There was a toilet paper shortage in 2020 that nobody saw coming, right? Some of us pretend we know what we're preparing for. And even when we say, you don't know what's coming, so we're going to prepare, you have something in mind, okay? Life is going to throw something at you completely different than what you're preparing for. I think it's really great to have supplies to work with, obviously, but I think we've stopped talking about the importance of creativity and ingenuity and substitution when it comes to getting through tough times. And you know what? I think there's a big reason for that. Do you want to know what it is? I think it's because creativity and ingenuity and substitution can't really be monetized. It's not a product. It's a skill you keep in your head, and it's kind of hard to teach that. It's something you live. It's something you pick up by trial and error. It's not like this tactile thing you can hold or you can buy now on Amazon. It's not something you can learn in a 6-session course. It's something you really have to live and just experience and hold all that information in your head. Skills are super important. Problem solving is important. And when I think of, the proverbial great-great-grandma and great-great-grandpa in how they were living, that's what made up a lot of what they were doing. It wasn't just how full the shelves were lined with jars or how many chickens they had in the coop or how much money they had in a mason jar out behind the woodshed. It was how full their brains were. And it was how they were able to pivot when they needed to. We get really excited about stories like Little House on the Prairie and Swiss Family Robinson and the Boxcar Children, and it's because of the creativity and the grit. So maybe instead of Tactical Dude as kind of our mascot, or the person we're going to follow along with in this whole how we're going to get through tough times discussion, maybe our mascot should be great-great-grandma. Maybe our mascot should be the struggling young couple. Or maybe our mascot should be the person who wakes up and says, oh, this is what we're dealing with today. Huh. Okay. Now, I am not saying at all don't stock stuff up. If you have the means and you have the inclination, by all means, go at it. What I am saying here is there's this neat little quote that homesteaders like to pass around all the time, and it says, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. And some of you literally just said that with me because it's one of your favorite quotes as a homesteader, right? And sometimes I have a really hard time putting the vibe of that quote together in the same brain space as the whole prepping movement. Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without goes against a lot of what is out there with some prepping communities. The proverbial great-great-grandma was not preparing for an event or a someday gonna happen like people talk about now. The young couple trying to figure out how to buy groceries is not preparing for an event or a someday gonna happen. Great-great-grandma was just trying to do life and was just doing what was required to make that continue in the reality she was living in. The young, struggling couple is just trying to do life and trying to figure out what's required to make that continue in the reality they are living in. When I was 24 years old with a 12-and-a-half-month-old and a brand new baby, I was not thinking about zombies. I was not thinking about what we would do if the banks went under. I was not thinking about, do we have enough beans and rice and ammo stored? And you know what? We survived. We did it. And while there were a lot of stressful times, I knew we would figure it out. And we did. Because we were smart. Because we were creative. Because we were part of a really fabulous community. Because we did without a lot of things. And because if you don't figure it out, you don't make it through. So you have to figure it out. It's that simple. And you know what? Most people will figure it out. But you know what? If we go with that line of thinking, we were creative, we're part of a really fabulous community, we did without a lot of things, we figured it out. If we go with that line of thinking, there's not as much that they can sell us, is there? Here's the big realization that I have figured out, okay? If we learn some stuff and we embrace creativity and we build a community of people who can help each other out, there aren't as many things they can sell us anymore. If I decide I'm going to borrow the big tool that I need instead of buying it, and I save all the seeds I need for next year, and I share my extra with my friends, and I learn new skills from my neighbors or the library or a couple YouTube videos or articles online, there isn't much they can sell us anymore. If I get my clothes at garage sales and I trade our farm-raised pork for someone else's farm-raised beef, and I make my life less about making money and more about saving money, well then, there isn't as much they can sell us anymore, is there? If I decide I'm going to reread the stacks and stacks and stacks of backwoods home magazines that I have and I'm going to suck in all those skills, there isn't as much they can sell us anymore, is there? And when you realize that, when you really sit with that for a minute, then you realize at some point, all that BS kind of falls apart. A lot of the BS that they're pushing falls apart. Now, there are some crappy things you will deal with. Someone hacking your bank account will happen. But it's not as exciting about fantasizing about zombies creeping up to your front door, is it? A really big snowstorm or wildfire, a tornado, is a pain to deal with. You don't want to deal with those, right? But that's not as exciting as the apocalypse. A job loss really sucks to deal with, but the end of the world is way more cool to talk about. The cost of life going up without the income to match puts you in a really rough spot. But you know what's really cool to talk about? The thought of a second American Civil War or World War III. Do you get what I'm saying, you guys? You and I are being marketed to all the freaking time. And the stuff that comes out as like the stuff that's going to go on the billboard is the stuff that gets people excited and worked up. There is a reason we call it prepper porn. The thing they're not telling you is that what you and great-great-grandma and young couple with little kids and regular everyday Joe Schmo actually need to get through tough times is a freaking brain and some skills and a supportive community. And the one reason that we're not talking about your brain and some skills and a supportive community is because there's not really any money in that, is there? Food for thought, you guys. There you go. That's what I've got for you today. Hopefully this gets you thinking. Hopefully it's going to help get you on the path you need to be on with wherever it is that you want to go. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. I will help you find the information you need. I will help connect you with people if I know the people you need to connect with to get the information that you need. Let's build a community here that is useful and is here for what community is supposed to be here for. Thank you so much for hanging out with me here again today. I hope today's episode makes you look around at what you have and the people that are in your life and helps you realize that, yeah, you really do have what you need. Have a great week, you guys. I will talk to you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com, find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media, or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay farmish.